Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Peter Bidewell, and I'm the VP of Institutional Product Adoption for Rayls. And today, I'd love to go on a journey with you as we explore the big blockers that have prevented massive institutional blockchain adoption and the missing piece that will help connect between traditional finance and decentralized finance. So taking a look at the landscape, imagine really you can categorize the areas of DeFi that have the most utility into two broad buckets. The first is in tokenized cash flows. This is to allow for stablecoins, tokenized deposits to be used for programmable payments, for atomic settlement of trades, and also to enable use cases such as intraday liquidity rebalancing or repo agreements. And then the second is around tokenized yield. So this is the issuance of tokenized assets that could be then distributed across secondary markets that are globally accessible, also used as collateral for lending and credit, and also used as a way to distribute the yield across to a suitable set of DeFi investors using compliance structures such as on-chain vaults. But the issue here is that the adoption, whilst we've seen some, and everything is gravitating towards these two major use cases, the issue is that the scale still isn't really there. And I beg the question, why? Well, actually, if you look at the landscape, institutions still have all the money and all the users. If you look at the entire global financial balance sheet, it's around $520 trillion, only around $4 trillion of which is within the crypto markets. And that's less than 1%. And if you look at the entire banked population of the 5 billion adults that trade and transact using their bank accounts every day, compared to the 50 million of active crypto users that we have today, again, that's only 1%. So if we're serious about crypto becoming the new financial rails, we need to make sure it is accessible for institutions to use. But why not? Because we've tried, right? Institutions have tried for well over a decade now. They tried using public chains, but couldn't really have access. They weren't really allowed. There were a bunch of issues that didn't fit their needs. So what do? They used permission networks, permission chains, which ironically were, despite being more decentralized, were actually far more isolated. Liquidity was trapped into walled gardens that then couldn't escape and actually didn't integrate nicely with their existing systems. You then also had these kind of really complex governance structures where consortia were formed, and you spent 2 years deciding about the rules first, where actually then, by the time you got to the end of this 2-year journey, the consortia goodwill died, and there was never a return on investment. So actually, this kind of trapping of liquidity and the lack of accessibility to other networks, both existing systems and public chains, basically led these projects to often go and die. And we've seen this in the numbers, where thousands of POCs and pilots on the permission chain side has only resulted in a few dozen actual production and at scale implementations by institutions. So the fact is it doesn't really work. By comparison, public chains, actually the future's pretty bright. I think we're all in agreement here over the last few months in particular, the energy has really shifted, the institutions have really come. And actually maybe this is because we have a few key factors at play now. The killer use cases have come. We have stablecoins being used and ramping up their adoption. Yield-bearing assets have found their product market fit and are growing in their scale. And even institutional RWAs. $33 trillion worth of stablecoin volumes of last year and are growing at a rapid pace. The regulation's also becoming clearer. Here in Europe, we have MiCA. There's also the ESMA DLT pilot regime. Across the Middle East, there's good work being done. Just the last couple of days, the UK has been announcing their tokenization vision. And back in the US, still, we have the likes of Clarity Act now passing through on the Banking Committee and soon to be going back to the Senate floor, hopefully to pass within the next 6 months. Likewise, the excuses that blockchains don't really scale doesn't really stand up anymore. Because actually, if you look at the leading L2 providers, even their mainnets are actually focused on around 15,000 or so transactions per second, which is pretty comparable to the likes of MasterCard. And even in testing now, we're reaching hundreds of thousands of transactions a second. So again, these blockers are being removed one by one. But the big but is that institutions still lack the privacy, the compliance, and the control that they need to bring their full capital customers, and operations on-chain. It's the difference between a sideshow where they can play around with the new technology and the main act, where it integrates beautifully with their existing systems. What they really need then is actually the best of all worlds. Institutions need their own sovereign infrastructure that they can control behind their own firewalls, where they have all the same enterprise features that they would expect. Role-based access controls, high availability, integrated beautifully to their existing systems, and customized exactly to their needs. But they also need to trade with their counterparties across private permission networks that are governed by their local regulator, tailored towards a very specific use case, and with some of the kind of key requirements to ensure atomic deterministic finality. So beyond their local markets with their kind of direct counterparties, they also need to have access to the global markets across public chains, where they can then have, again, fast deterministic finality, a way to trade without having to hold cryptocurrency or be subject to its volatility, and also to have some embedded compliance and kind of governance rules to ensure they meet their regulatory requirements. And then ideally, all three of these items would be EVM compatible, because then you allow for that composability of assets to flow nicely backwards and forwards across these different ledgers. And all of which underpinned by a privacy framework that ensures both anonymity and confidentiality of transactions, fully EVM compatible to be applied to any one of these different areas, and with selective disclosures so a regulator can peek into the transactions without having this black box approach. So all of this is the exam question, and this is where we started with Rails. So for Rails, we have built the Rails privacy node, the Rails private networks, the Rails public chain, which actually launched about 3 weeks ago, by the way, our mainnet launched, and the Rails Enigma privacy framework. And together they all create one interconnected ecosystem where banks and institutions can bring their genuine operations, capital, and customers into their own controlled infrastructure and then connect to wherever else they need to trade and settle and transact with their counterparties. This missing piece then on the privacy node allows for a single institution to have one instance, a sovereign chain that they have full control over behind their own firewalls, beautifully connected into their existing systems, their ERP systems, their treasury systems, but also has this optionality to then connect out to whichever other networks they decide. It's no longer they're subject to a consortium of other banks, other institutions to guide them on this. They are the center of their own universe. They should be able to decide. And with that EVM compatibility, you allow for these very seamless and composable flows of assets between private and public infrastructure, which is all down to their very specific governance rules. They control both ends of that bridge. We've seen some really good traction in Brazil and LATAM. So Rails has been in production with the Brazilian DTCC, they're called Nuclear, since June 2024. They're now issuing 40,000 RWA real financial assets onto Rails infrastructure every single month. We've had commitments from NemoFast. They're the largest energy and commodities trading firm in LATAM. They have committed $100 billion to tokenize onto Rails in the coming months. Everything from the inventory through to the trade finance cash flows from the Middle East, through to the shipping lanes across the Atlantic, through to the distribution down to the actual gasoline pumps across LATAM. Amfi has committed $1 billion in private credit and tokenized credit receivables assets to allow for high-yielding, lower-risk assets that are backed by the official registrar to be brought on-chain and then distributed across global audiences. And we've also installed and been working with the Central Bank of Brazil for their direct CBDC program, 16 of the biggest commercial banks in Brazil, and several other projects as well that you can see here. So very strong in LATAM, and now we're looking to expand the same implementation of this multi-chain architecture to other parts of the world. So back to the exam question. If you remember, we had two major areas of interest within the DeFi markets. There were the tokenized cash flows and tokenized yield being the two. So the first one, looking at tokenized cash flows, the stablecoin sandwich use case has been discussed quite a lot more recently. And let me try and add a slight spin to this that could be quite interesting. So now imagine, rather than just a stablecoin, you have a private stablecoin allowing for interbank wholesale cross-border payments, but without revealing the transaction data of who's transacting and how much and what. So here the setup would be that the two banks, Bank A and Bank B, would have their own privacy node, their own private infrastructure in their own local jurisdiction. You then have the public chain that sits in the center, which allows for local currency to be on-ramped via a liquidity provider into an account that they have within their, a private stablecoin account within the Rails public chain. So this allows for the slides aren't quite nicely working for me, but imagine you've got yen moves to the client account, the private stablecoin is issued to Bank A's account, a transfer of that private stablecoin is done with full anonymity and confidentiality across to Bank B inside of this same anonymous, highly private contract. Oh, and then you have the off-ramp the other end where there is the opposite. So the liquidity provider on the European side can then enable the withdrawal back to fiat currency. So you get the full end-to-end with full composability. The difference being that all of this happens on-chain because you have real tokenized deposit, real fiat money on both ends, and you also have a fully private transaction in the center. So within here's a demo. We have, is this going to work? No? Okay. The slides aren't working for me, unfortunately. The next one then, so what this would have been, sorry, would be the Rails dashboard where we can go through and I can show the actual transaction flows demonstrating two different views once the transaction is completed. The public chain block explorer showing that all the information has been obfuscated. The sender, the receiver, the amount of tokens being sent is set to 0. Which token is being sent is again obfuscated. And then there is a second view, which is the auditor explorer. And this is a specific instance of a block explorer only accessible to a designated auditor or regulator. And with that, they can see everything. They have the access to see who sent, who received, any of the metadata, what token was transferred, how much of that token was transferred. The second use case then is the private tokenization with public yield distribution. This is back to this kind of tokenized yield use case. The setup here being then you have two different zones. You have the Bank A's privacy node, and then you have the public chain, which includes a vault in the center. So Bank A can now issue their own assets into their own private infrastructure. They can lock an asset as collateral to enable the public chain wrapped equivalent to be minted into their own account. So again, they control both ends of that bridge. And then they deposit that into the pool for the on-chain asset vault. That can then allow for compliance checks to prove who's a suitable investor. The investor to then allocate their capital in return for a deposit token. And then for that investor to receive yield payments until eventually then the maturity term comes and the principal is repaid, ultimately then enabling the asset to be withdrawn from the pool and then burned to unlock the original collateral back in Bank A's privacy node. So the key thing is then this seamless interaction between your own private infrastructure and the public chain contracts. Let's see if this one works. Here we go, good. So this is back to the Rails dashboard. For now, we're going to go into the token management area. And you can see there's a few existing tokens. We're going to go ahead and create a new one. So this one will be given a name and the yield-bearing asset token. We're going to select which networks from this one dashboard, which different chains we want to allow this to be traded across. We'll set the max supply, the initial mint amount, and the lock amount, which is the amount we want to, in one fell swoop, lock as collateral to then issue directly into a vault on the public chain. And here, again, we added the address for that public vault. And in one click, this enables a bank to have the full end-to-end composable experience across two different chains straight into that vault to allow for yield to be distributed. If you're interested in stablecoins, tokenized deposits, or anything to do with yield-bearing financial assets, would love to have a conversation after the talk. Thank you. Any questions? We have some time.
If there is anything, I can just go around the room. While we're waiting for any question, actually one from my side. Why do you think Brazil and South America in general pick up quite some steam compared to Europe or other continents?
So that's a great question. I think there's probably two different factors. The first is that there's a real sweet spot between the most advanced nations, let's say, and those that are more emerging. Brazil is a really, really perfect sweet spot where it is highly innovative. If you look at some of their instant payments networks like Pix, it's one of the most advanced in the world. They've done an incredible job, both in terms of supplying the right regulation and the right infrastructure to enable highly innovative financial services and payments infrastructure. The next step they've taken is to do the same, but for the tokenized world. They know that you have to fix the settlement layer first to allow for tokenized settlement, to then enable all of the other tokenized assets to be traded and settled. And so that's been the approach as a platform for innovation. It's not there to replace the instant settlement networks, but to enhance them with another layer for other reasons. So Brazil, I think, is that really perfect sweet spot of hungry for innovation and decisive action where they move nice and fast.
Thank you very much. Any other question? Otherwise, oh yeah, one coming.
You said the project is a layer one, right? If I got it.
The public chain side, yes. Yeah.
So you actually have a token for it? I mean,
yes,
okay.
we do. So it's RLS is the token.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
No, because I was just going to ask for the consensus and stuff, but if you have a token. No, because as what it seems like a chain without a token, so it could be permissioned on the side. But
I'm with you. No, and that's a key point, by the way. So unlike others, where they claim to have a public chain, but actually it's really just a private permission chain with a public marketing, Rails is the opposite. So we have very much the private side, private permission chains built and set up for institutional use. But then very specifically, the public chain is a fully public permissionless EVM layer one. You can connect your MetaMask as an individual retail user. There's no limitations, there's no KYC. It's a standard public permissionless chain. And the key thing is then you connect the two together with a private bridge between the institution's private infrastructure and their own accounts on the public chain. So rather than having this kind of heavy bridge, single point of failure, each bank basically has their own private bridge that they control themselves, each one.
Do you? I mean, if you know the number, do you have a lot of like nodes participating to the chain? I mean, how it is going on the consensus side? I mean, is it already like a lot of decentralized stuff? I mean, and
yeah,
just to get how much it is decentralized since it just got out 3 weeks ago. You said so.
Great question. So we've started with a progressive staged approach towards decentralization. The first step is much more centralized. And we have a permission validator set that we're implementing. And then we will be progressing towards a fully decentralized validator and permissionless validator approach.
Thank you.
Okay.
So you can connect with Peter. He left all his social handles, and another round of applause for him. Thank you very much.